All right, team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton. Delighted to have your company with me once again for a look today at the topic of growth and doing it sustainably. So growth we would usually interpret as a good thing in business, but sometimes it can actually work against us if we don't do it sustainably. And as leaders, we have a huge part to play in making sure that we mitigate the risks around growing too quickly. So we'll delve into an example from history that I think is going to illustrate this point really, really well. The topic of that today is going to be Uber. You might have heard of them. We're going to go all the way back to when Uber first entered the scene and have a look at a story from 2010. So here we go. I want you to picture this. It's the early 2010s. And a small startup is rewriting the rules of transportation. You tap a button and a car appears, a pretty cool concept. No cash, no dispatches, no waiting on hold. And that company, of course, is Uber. And it's not just growing, it's invading globally. They're in city after city, country after country, Paris, London, Sydney, New York. They are absolutely everywhere, and it's happening very, very quickly. The playbook from Uber is a simple one. Launch fast, break things, and deal with the consequences later. Internally, the mantra is clear, and that is win at all costs from a business perspective. And for a little while, it works. Revenue surges, valuation climbs, and investors pour in billions of dollars. Uber becomes one of the fastest growing companies in history. It truly was a meteoric rise. But beneath the surface, something is starting to crack. Because while the business is scaling at an incredible speed, the organisation itself isn't. Teams are being built overnight, leaders are promoted faster than they can grow into their roles, and processes are patched together just to keep up with the growth. And culture becomes whatever wins in the moment. Then the stories start leaking out. Reports of internal dysfunction, allegations of a toxic workplace, regulatory battles in multiple countries, and a company that is moving so fast it can't fully control itself anymore. So fast forward a little while, and by 2017 the pressure really does reach a breaking point. Investors step in, and Travis Kalanick, the man who drove Uber's explosive rise, is forced to step down. Now, of course, Uber doesn't collapse, but it has to do something that it's avoided for years, and that is slow down. It needs to rebuild leadership, install governance, and redefine its culture. In other words, it has to become sustainable. And that is the lesson that we're going to use for our discussion today. Because Uber, of course, didn't fail from a lack of growth. They're still around today. They're a very, very successful company and a household name. But the point is, it nearly broke from too much growth. And that's an interesting concept, isn't it? That growth can be a negative thing. Growth is exciting, it's visible, it's celebrated, but while it is all of those things, we need to take stock of the invisible elements that too much growth brings. And that is whether your organisation actually has the fundamentals to support that growth. Because if your systems, your culture, and your leadership don't scale at the same pace, then growth doesn't strengthen the company. It actually exposes the weaknesses that exist. And then we have the paradox, don't we? Which is the faster you grow, the more disciplined that you have to be, or eventually growth can become the very thing that takes you down. And we will indeed have a bit of a look at this in a more in-depth manner right now. You know, a couple of things to think about here from a leadership perspective. And the reason I'm really zeroing in on the leadership aspect of this is because we're responsible for making sure that we do this sustainably. So here's some initial thoughts. As I said at the top, growth is good. We all want growth. But we have to ensure that we lay the foundations appropriately to support that growth. And the way that I've broken it down today from a notes perspective is as follows. And I think it starts at the owner level, right? So it might be a founder level if you're talking about something like Uber or Airbnb, for example. Or it could be the C-suite, the CEO, COO, those sorts of levels. The responsibility, as I see it at those levels, is to firstly make sure that the organisation has a vision. Why? You might go, why does that matter from a sustainable perspective? It might sound like a wishy-washy term, vision, right? Well, it's actually really important, because if we don't have a vision, a coherent vision at the top, how do we know what we're aiming for as an organisation? And the truth is you don't. So the vision from the C-suite or the founder level is crucial so that the teams underneath them know where the goalposts are. It sets the aim that everybody underneath them must be working towards together and at the same time. So we have a clarity of purpose, absolutely essential. So we have something to grow towards. And we get that consistency. I think that's really the theme here, right? The vision provides a common goal, which gives us a consistency of purpose. And the second thing that we need to make sure we grow sustainably after the vision is in place and we're all aiming towards the same thing is perhaps the most important component of this whole process. And that is people and the structure to support the growth. So we know where we're going, we know what we're aiming for. Now, how do we drive that sustainably? The engine room is the people and the structure, and this really is something that there's a lot in this. So we need clearly defined roles and responsibilities of the people that are going to drive us towards this goal. We need the required skills clearly identified and onboarded so that we have the ability to reach the vision. And then, of course, we need the leadership underneath that CEO, C-suite or founder level. We need that next layer of leadership to provide each of those streams or areas of the business with a clear clarity of purpose and the guidance to drive standards to where we need them to be. We've touched on this in previous episodes, but this is such a crucial layer and such an important part of growing sustainably, because what that second level of leadership gives us is a conduit between the C-suite and the founder level, the people who set the vision and the strategy, and the workforce. Absolutely critical. And a huge part of making sure that we have the foundation in place that we need to grow sustainably. And then we have an often overlooked aspect of what we need in an organisation or a business to facilitate sustainable growth. And that is the systems. The systems and the processes in place to support the extra demand placed upon it, or placed upon them. So we need the tools to do the job. What do those tools look like, you might ask? Here's my top 3. We need good asset management. All right, so most businesses have equipment, most of them. We need good asset management systems so that we know what we have on the books. You know, let's take a practical example from perhaps a facilities management style organisation, or an organisation that has a lot of company assets on the books, whether it be trucks, cars, and other big ticket items. We need a good asset management system to know what we have at any given time, how long we've had it for, And then also detail those other really useful management pieces, like when was the last time this device was serviced? Where's all the original purchasing documentation that shows what we bought it for? And we can use all that to potentially build an asset management life cycle so that we can forecast what we need to replace and make a plan to ensure that the funds are available accordingly. Maybe a good asset management system, not maybe, actually, definitely, a good asset management system protects us against auditing. It means that we have our ducks lined up. Now, that's something very important if you work in government, for example, or another industry that is subject to auditing and scrutiny. But aside from all those regulatory benefits and your ability to manage them, it's just generally good practice as a business to understand what you have on the books at any given time so that you know when you need to replace things and what your liabilities are, and then you can plan accordingly. So asset management is very, very important in most fields. Then we have a good expense management system. Now, if we thought asset management was important, expense management is really important. Now, the two do go hand in hand to some extent. Okay, but a good expense management system is really foundational. Right? So the good asset management system tells us what we have at any given time. The expense management system tells us, where's our money going? Where's our money going? What are we spending our money on? What does our run rate look like in terms of spend? Where are we bleeding cash? And this really is foundational for good organisational management. And without these tools, and of course a lot of expansion going on and money going out left, right and centre, as often happens when you take into account cost of doing business expenses, we need to keep a real close eye on cash flow and bleed points from a monetary perspective. And it's a lot to ask of your managers and leaders to track those expenses accurately if you haven't given them really good tools to do so. You know, how much are we spending on stationery every week? How much are we spending on systems and data? Maybe equipment servicing. There's many, many examples depending on the style of business that you're in or that you're running. But one thing is sure, and that is that money's going to go out, right? Business is expensive to conduct, especially in this day and age. And we need to have a real good handle on where our money is going. It's no different to your household finances. And that auditing and stock take needs to be a regular part of the way that we operate at every level of management. And if we don't have a really good expense management system in play, it's going to be very difficult to manage that. So that's a part of growing sustainably. Then we have the need for a good client relationship management system. Some people know it as a stakeholder relationship management system. And if you've not heard of this before, basically it's a great big database that comes off the shelf and ready. And it enables you to input data around every interaction with an existing client or a potential client so that it is the singular source of truth that anybody in the organisation can log into and get up to speed on with respect to recent engagements with a particular contact. And really what it is it's designed to be a central repository whereby you can identify new business opportunities. You can look up a particular contact, perhaps that one of your colleagues has been dealing with respect to a new project proposal. And it's designed to make sure that you have continuity of information when it comes to knowing who to go to from a business opportunity perspective. It's a great way to collate information around business opportunity. And if you're going to expand sustainably, that can be a real asset in your organisation and something that helps you to do it really well. Now here's another one that I'm going to throw in here. we need to make sure that we can walk before we run. Our organisation has to be built on a solid foundation. And while fast expansion doesn't make success impossible, and I think Uber's a great example of that, it can make it unsustainable. So we want to be ambitious, but we also want to be strategic about that ambition. And while the three things that I mentioned there are absolutely crucial from a systems perspective, I really do just want to circle back to re-emphasize the people and the structure element that I mentioned earlier. We must have clearly defined roles and responsibilities. And we must have good, competent leadership installed to lead each of those streams and skill sets. You really can't have any one of these things without the other. If you don't have people and structure, what is the point in having a good vision? If you don't know where you're going, what's the point in having good people and structure? And the systems, I think, is probably an aspect of business that I do often see lagging behind those other two things. But really, the trifecta, the gold standard, is all three of those things. Great vision, clarity of purpose and direction, the people and the structure to drive us towards the vision. And then, of course, our systems to make sure that we have the tools we need to do the job. You know, the Chinese have proverbs for many things, and they have one that I think is really applicable to this particular topic as well. And it was from the teachings of Confucius. And the proverb is, if you seek speed, you won't reach your destination. Now we know that's not absolutely true, but we know that there's a truth in that. You know, there's always a caveat, right? But safe to say, I think that something like Uber, while eventually it did become very, very successful, it is plausible that if they hadn't have had that come to Jesus moment in 2017, it could have really unraveled. So I suppose what that proverb is saying, if you seek speed, you won't reach your destination, is that to rush is dangerous. And while it might look like it's paying dividends and working in the short term, over the long term, unless you're willing to make changes and adjust your approach and focus on sustainability and structure and systems and whatnot, there is a risk that growth might in fact be your undoing. And that is quite ironic, isn't it? Guys, if you want to explore more topics along these lines and you're interested in reading blogs and things like that, I would encourage you to check out exceptionalleadershippodcast.com. It's my very own website where I do produce blogs, and I also have an option for you to sign up for a fortnightly newsletter called The Brief. We've had quite a few people do it already. What it is essentially a little email that I'll send out on a Monday morning every fortnight. All I need is your email address. That's it. There's no catch. There's no sales. There's nothing like that. It is just free information being distributed to you. And it'll be cool to have you sign up and join us for The Brief. And it is something that I think we need to recognise as having value from a sharing perspective, right? These lessons and whatnot are great for us to internalize and for us to practice, but the goal really is to get this information out to as many people as possible so that the standard of leadership globally can be improved. And we all stand to benefit from that, because we all know that there are all too many examples at literally every level of society these days of poor leadership, and it really doesn't benefit anybody for that to be the prevailing factor. So head over to exceptionalleadershippodcast.com, sign up for the newsletter, The Brief, and of course subscribe to the show. Tell a friend, tell 10 friends, and together perhaps we can drive the improvement of leadership all over the place. Wouldn't that be good? Guys, been a pleasure. Until next time, I'll see you later.